In this video, I am going to discuss Mending Wall by Robert Frost. So, Mending Wall is written by Robert Frost, which is composed of 45 lines of verse and written in a first person point of view in a conversational way between the neighbor and the speaker. So it is blank verse and has an iambic pentameter metric scheme. So a little background about Robert Frost is that the themes of his poems deal about nature or scenes in nature. That is why in this poem it has a setting that visualizes a countryside in England that has a farm or lots of trees, something like that. After I read this poem, I have listed questions for me to figure out, and one of the questions I have gathered is that, are borders necessary to maintain relationship between people? As I read it again, it somehow relates to the saying, familiarity bridges condemn, in which privacy or independent identities are important, as well as refraining from forming issues or having opinions with each other or from each other. So each other here, I mean the relationship we build with our neighbors. So just by looking at the title, Mending Wall, we can associate the semantic difference between the words mending and wall. We all know that mending means repairing or restoring something that has been damaged, while wall means putting boundary or separating a place from the other. So the poem describes how the speaker and the neighbor meet to rebuild a stone wall between their properties, a ritual repeated every spring, as what is being stated or visualizes in the poem. This ritual raises some important questions over the course of the poem as the speaker considers the purpose of borders between people and the value of human work. So let's try to look deeper. The poem revolves around the theme of boundaries, both physical and metaphorical, and explores the nature of human connection and division. It is written in a form of dialogue between the two neighbors who come together annually to mend the stone wall that separates their property. So, annually meaning during the springtime. The narrator questions the necessity of the wall, expressing doubts about its purpose beyond keeping their respective properties separate. So he wonders why they need a wall when there are no cows to confine, only apple trees and pine trees. So the neighbor, however, firmly upholds the tradition of maintaining the wall, repeating the saying, good fences make good neighbors, which is located almost at the end of the poem and repeated twice. So throughout the poem, Frost presents contrasting views on the wall. The narrator leans towards the idea of openness, questioning the barriers that divide people, while the neighbor represents tradition, order, and the belief of maintaining clear boundaries. So, Mending Wall raises thought provoking questions about the significance of walls and boundaries in human relationships and the tension between individuality and community. It has been interpreted as a reflection on the human desire for connection and separation, exploring themes of isolation, identity, and complexities of social interaction. Because when we say we are building a wall, it means it also associates the disconnection of properties with the two neighbors. So the closing lines, he says again, good fences make good neighbors. So these have become a widely quoted phrases and have often been taken out of context to emphasize the importance of boundaries in various situations. This means that Mending Wall is a rich and layered poem that invites readers to contemplate the nature of human divisions, the role of boundaries, and the complexities of interpersonal relationships. So let's do a lexico-semantic analysis of this poem. So mending let's first look into the lexical analysis. So we have here mending. Let's start with the title. Mending means to act the act of repairing or restoring something that is damaged or broken. And wall, a structure built to enclose or divide an area, typically made of bricks, stones, or other materials. Now, let's have a semantic analysis out of these words. So, mending wall, the title suggests a focus on the act of repairing or restoring a physical boundary or barrier, if the two words are put together. So the overall theme of the poem explores the significance of boundaries and human tendency to create and maintain the divisions. So now let's move to the key lexical and semantic elements of the poem. So we have here the word stone, which is repeated many times in the poem. Stone. So the stone here represents the physical material used to conduct the wall and emphasizes the solidity and permanence of the barrier, since stone is used as a term to build the wall there, not the usual material, bricks or any other material. So the author uses the word stone. Next is we have the term neighbor, which is also repeated many times in the poem. So neighbor refers to the person living adjacent to the narrator's property and symbolizes human relationships and interaction. Next is good. The quote, "Good fences make good neighbors." So it is repeated twice in the poem. So this reoccurring phrase in the poem captures the contrasting viewpoints on the necessity of boundaries, with one neighbor advocating for maintaining clear divisions as a way to preserve harmony and order, while the narrator questions the need for such barriers in their particular circumstances. So in here, we can associate metaphorical interpretations. So the physical wall can be seen as a metaphor for psychological and or emotional barriers that individuals use to protect themselves from others. And the act of mending the wall can symbolize the effort to repair or reconcile fractured relationships or bridges the gaps between people. So if we're going to look upon the tension and conflict of the poem, present in the poem, the contrasting perspectives on the wall create tension between the desire for openness and connection, which is presented by the narrator, and the adherence to tradition and the need for clear boundaries, which is presented by the neighbor. So the ongoing dialogue between the two neighbors highlights the underlying conflict and differing philosophies regarding human connection and separation. So this gives us the overall message that the poem raises. So it raises questions about the purpose and necessity of boundaries and explores the tension between individuality and communal harmony. So it challenges the reader to consider the significance of walls, both physical and metaphorical, in human relationships and complexities of human interaction. So since there are repeated lines in the poem, let's look into the parallelism of the poem. So when we say parallelism, it is a literary device that involves the repetition of grammatical structures, phrases, or ideas for rhetorical effect. So in Mending Wall, the parallelism can be observed in the reoccurring phrases and structures throughout the poem. So for example, something there is that doesn't love a wall. So this line is repeated at the beginning and end of the poem. So this creates a questioning, it emphasizes the questioning of the purpose and the necessity of the wall. Next is something there. Next is before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. So these lines or this parallel structure highlights the narrator's doubt toward the wall. So the questioning, the need for boundaries, and and considering the potential consequences. Third is these lines. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only, and the shade of trees. So, in this line, it describes the neighbor's action. The parallel structure emphasizes the mysterious nature of the neighbor's behavior. And lastly, the repeated lines, good fences make good neighbors. So this line is repeated twice in the poem, becoming a refrain. So the parallel repetition reinforces the neighbor's beliefs in the importance of maintaining clear boundaries and the traditional way or the traditional saying associated with it, because the neighbor also follows what his father is doing. So these instances of parallelism in Mending Wall contribute to the poem's rhythm and overall structure. They help to convey the contrasting viewpoints and tensions between the narrator and the neighbor, while also emphasizing key themes and ideas explored in the poem. So now, let's look into the role of punctuation marks in the poem. So the punctuation marks in the poem plays an important role in conveying the extended meaning, rhythm, and overall structure of the poem. So Frost's use of punctuation mark helps guide the reader's interpretation and understanding of the text. So we have here quotation marks, which is only present in the in the famous saying of the poem and what the neighbors actually say to the speaker of the poem. So Frost uses quotation marks to delineate the dialogue between the two neighbors, distinguishing their respective statements. So this helps the reader differentiate between the narrator's perspective and the neighbor's perspective. Next is the use of period. The use of periods. So the period is used at the end of the sentences or statements indicating a complete thought or idea. It is used throughout the poem to mark the end of most lines and to create grammatical breaks. Next is the use of commas. So commas are used to separate words, phrases, or clauses within sentences. They contribute to the rhythm and pacing of the poem and aid in clarifying the structure of the sentences. Next is the use of colon. Here. itong use of here, the use of colon. So the colon used in the poem is used to introduce direct speech or quoted material. It indicates that the following words are the neighbor's direct statement. So here. Next is the use of semicolon. Just like this one. A semicolon is used in the poem to create a pause stronger than a comma but less final than a period. It separates two related independent clauses within a sentence. Next is the use of exclamation point. So an exclamation point is used in the poem to denote strong emotion, emphasis, or surprise. It adds intensity to the lines where it appears. Next is enjambment, just like this one. The lines that doesn't have a punctuation mark, just like this one and this one. So Frost employs enjambment, which is the continuation of a sentence or thought across multiple lines without a grammatical pause in various places throughout the poem. This technique enhances the flow of the poem and encourages the reader to connect ideas across lines, emphasizing the continuity of the dialogue. So, in general, the punctuation in Mending Wall aids in conveying the rhythm, tone, and meaning of the poem. It helps structure the dialogue, creates pauses for reflection, and guides the reader's interpretation of the text. So it is really important since this poem shows a conversational way between the speaker and the neighbor. So the punctuation marks really help in understanding what the conversation tries to emphasize, or which point of view or which idea are we reading. Is it from the neighbor's perspective or the perspective of the speaker? Because what they said, or what the flow of conversation highlighted there, also contributes to the overall meaning of the poem. So in terms of linguistic forms, Mending Wall by Robert Frost exhibits a range of poetic techniques that contribute to its meaning and impact. So here are some notable linguistic aspects of the poem. So first is the rhyme scheme. The poem follows a predominantly blank verse form with no strict rhyme scheme. So however, Frost incorporates occasional rhymes throughout the poem, often uses ABAB or AABB pattern. So this selective use of rhyme adds musicality and structure to the lines. Stone, there, heel, line, again, go, each. So this rhyme scheme is being measured at the end, the last word in every verse. Next is the meter. The poem is written in iambic pentameter, a common metrical pattern in English poetry. So each line typically consists of 5 metrical feet, with each foot containing an unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable. This regular meter gives the poem a rhythmic and flowing quality. Next is the repetition. Frost employs repetition for emphasis and to create a sense of rhythm and unity in the poem. So for example, the phrases, "good fences make good neighbors," is repeated twice, highlighting the contrasting perspective on the necessity of boundaries. So in this, the first line is focus on the the neighbor's thought, while the last one is the speaker's realization. So next is imagery. The poem incorporates vivid imagery to evoke sensory experiences and enhance the reader's understanding. So, example, apple trees, pine trees, and gaps between the two can pass abreast. This one. So these visual and tactile images paint a picture of a landscape and the physical act of mending the wall. So we can visualize when this or when where the conversation of the two happens. So next is metaphor. So Frost employs metaphors to convey deeper meanings and schemes. So the wall itself serves as a metaphor for the boundaries, both physical and emotional, that humans create to separate themselves from one another. So it symbolizes the division that exists in society and the human tendency to establish and maintain boundaries. So regarding the meaning of the poem, Mending Wall explores themes of boundaries, tradition, human connection, and the tension between individuality and community. The poem raises questions about the purpose and necessity of walls and challenges the reader to reflect on the significance of division and separation. So, are the readers agree to what the notion of the neighbor suggests, which is building a wall, or what the speaker suggests that walls are not necessary? So it invites contemplation on the boundaries that human create, both tangible and intangible, and the potential consequences of those division on relationship and understanding. So through these linguistic forms, including rhyme, meter, repetition, imagery, and metaphor, the poem communicates its themes and prompts readers to critically consider the complexities of human interactions, the meaning of boundaries, and the potential of connection and unity. Um, as we read the poem, we can primarily visualize the scene or the nature that is being visualized by Frost in this poem. But what we can really consider, or what we can really focus on understanding the meaning of the poem, is how the conversation of the two people flows, their flow of thought impact to the readers. So instead of focusing the imagery and metaphor present in the poem, what we are going to focus is their conversation, in order to understand the meaning of the poem. So Mending Wall is really a nice poem by Robert Frost because it is because he incorporates his usual themes in his poems, and what he observes, and he relates what he observes in nature to the relationship of the society or the community or the people living in a place. So that's all for my interpretation. Thank you so much.